All right, let's plug in and turn the volume way up. We're about to dive into a story that's got it all: rebellion, creativity, and get this, the invention of the teenager. Yeah, that was a new idea once. We're going to explore how a brand new kind of music gave a whole generation a voice for the very first time. So, I've got a question for you. Blue jeans, an electric guitar, and the phone in your pocket. What could they possibly have in common? I know, it sounds totally random, right? But believe it or not, they're all connected. Each one is a super powerful symbol of youth culture from a different era. And today, we're going to focus on how that one in the middle, the electric guitar, basically lit the fuse for everything that came after. So let's jump in our time machine and head back to the 1950s. Picture this. The radio is on, but it's mostly playing, well, pretty slow, quiet music. You know, the stuff your grandparents might have listened to. But something else was starting to stir. Something loud. Something exciting was bubbling up from just beneath the surface, and it was about to give young people a sound that was 100% theirs. And that sound? It was rock and roll. Now, this wasn't just one type of music. It was this incredible mashup. Think of it like a recipe. You take the soulful energy of African American rhythm and blues, mix in the storytelling you'd find in country music, and then add a whole lot of passion from gospel. And the result? It was loud. It was fast. The beat just made you want to move. It was totally energetic and absolutely nothing like what you'd hear on mainstream radio. And this is the part that's kind of mind-blowing. Before rock and roll came along, the whole idea of being a teenager, it didn't really exist. Seriously, you were a kid, and then boom, you were basically expected to be a mini adult. But this music, it changed everything. Suddenly, young people had their own culture, their own fashion. We're talking blue jeans, leather jackets, their own places to hang out. And most importantly, they had a soundtrack that basically shouted to the world, hey, we're here and we're different. Now, all of this rebellion had a secret weapon, a piece of technology that made it all possible. See, this wasn't music you played on a quiet old acoustic guitar. No way. It was electric. And that brings us to a really cool question. How in the world does an electric guitar, the ultimate symbol of rock, get so unbelievably loud? Well, it's actually a super clever three-step process. First, the musician plucks the metal strings. Simple enough, but here's the magic. Right underneath those strings are these little things called pickups. They're basically magnets wrapped in wire. They grab the vibrations from the string and turn them into a tiny electrical signal. Then that signal zips through a cable to an amplifier, which does exactly what it sounds like. It cranks that signal way, way up and blasts it out through a speaker. And just like that, one person on stage could be heard by thousands, turning the guitarist into an absolute hero. You know, a sound this powerful, this new, there was no way it was going to stay in just one country. So let's fast forward a bit into the 1960s, because this American invention was about to hop across the Atlantic Ocean and kickstart a full-blown global movement. And it was called the British Invasion. Yup, bands over in the UK, you've probably heard of them, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, they were listening to all this amazing American rock and roll, and they loved it. So they took that sound, added their own unique flavor, and then brought it back to America, and people went absolutely wild for it. This was the moment everyone realized, whoa, rock isn't just American anymore. It had become a global language, and it made kids everywhere think, hey, I could do that, and start their own bands. Okay, so the bands are getting bigger, and you know what else got bigger? The concerts. This is when the whole idea of the music festival was born. We're talking huge, multi-day events. The most famous one, of course, was Woodstock back in 1969. Just imagine, for 3 whole days, hundreds of thousands of people came together in a giant field. And it wasn't just to hear the bands. It was about being part of a community, a moment. It turned rock from something you just listened to at home into this massive shared experience. But here's the thing about rock. It never, ever stands still. It's always changing. So as we push into the 70s and 80s, the music starts to splinter off into all these new, wild directions. It got way louder, even more rebellious, and something else, something visual, suddenly became just as important as the sound itself. And man, you can see just how fast things were moving here. We go from the British invasion in the mid-60s to Woodstock in '69, and then, almost immediately after, things just exploded. Rock kind of split into these different paths. One path was all about getting heavier, faster, and louder. And the other? It was all about a brand new technology that would completely change how we see our music. So first up, you've got hard rock. This style took the electric guitar's volume and just cranked it to 11. I'm talking about bands using literal walls of amplifiers on stage. The music was just intense. Super powerful drumming, screaming vocals, and the concerts themselves turned into these epic theatrical shows with smoke machines, crazy light displays, and sometimes even pyrotechnics. The whole point was to create this huge, overwhelming sensory experience. But at the same time, some people were looking at all this and thinking, whoa, rock is getting way too big and complicated. And so, in reaction to that, another movement just exploded onto the scene: punk rock. Punk was the total opposite. It was all about raw, unfiltered energy. The message was simple and powerful. You don't need to be a guitar virtuoso to be in a band. All you need are a few simple chords, something you're passionate about, and a whole lot of energy. And punk wasn't just about the music, not at all. It was a whole attitude, a do-it-yourself culture. You couldn't buy the right clothes? Fine, make your own with safety pins and rips. Fans started their own little magazines called zines. They challenged what was considered normal with brightly colored hair and mohawks. It was all about grabbing rock and dragging it back down to its raw, rebellious street-level roots. And then the next huge game changer arrived, and it wasn't a sound, it was a screen. Television. When music video channels like MTV launched, everything shifted. For the first time, you didn't just hear your favorite bands, you saw them 24/7. A really cool, creative music video could launch a band into superstardom overnight. All of a sudden, how you looked, your fashion, your style, became just as important as how you sounded. So, after all that flash and style of the 80s, where could rock possibly go next? Well, let's jump forward to the 1990s and head towards today, because we're about to see how a new generation of musicians reacted against all that 80s glamour. And, you guessed it, how technology was about to change the game all over again. You know how punk was a reaction to that big, polished rock of the 70s? Well, history repeated itself. A new style called grunge bubbled up, and it was a direct reaction to the flashy, slick 80s. It came mostly from the city of Seattle, and it was this powerful blend of heavy metal's powerful sound and punk rock's raw, no-frills attitude. And the lyrics, they got a lot more personal, a lot more serious, often talking about real emotions and struggles. And the look was a huge part of the statement. Gone were the spandex, the hairspray, the expensive costumes. Instead, grunge musicians just wore everyday clothes. Think flannel shirts, old ripped jeans, comfortable boots. It was a conscious choice, a complete rejection of that image-obsessed decade that came before it. The message was clear. The focus is back on the music, on powerful, authentic songs that really meant something. So, while all this was happening with the sound of rock, something even bigger was happening to how we actually listen to music. The change was, well, it was massive. Think about it. We went from needing physical objects you had to go out and buy, like vinyl records or cassette tapes, to a totally new world. A world of digital files, of streaming services where almost every song ever recorded is at your fingertips. Now, it's all about playlists you can make in seconds and share with anyone on the planet instantly. But you know what's funny? There's been this really fascinating twist in the story. Even with all this amazing digital technology, something really old is suddenly cool again. I'm talking about vinyl records. They're making a massive comeback, and a lot of young people are getting into them. So why? Well, a lot of listeners will tell you the sound is just warmer, more realistic. And beyond that, you get to hold it. You get this big, beautiful piece of artwork for the cover. It's a physical connection to the music and its history, which is something you just don't get from a file on your phone. Okay, so we've been on quite a journey, right? From those first fuzzy electric guitars in the 1950s, all the way to the streaming playlists we have today. After all those changes, all those decades, what's the big takeaway? What is rock's real legacy? And why does this music, and all its different shapes and sizes, still matter? When you really break it down, rock's greatest superpower is its ability to change. It's never stayed the same. It's always absorbing new ideas, always reflecting what young people are feeling and thinking about at that moment in time. You can literally hear its DNA in so many other styles of music today, from pop to hip-hop. But its core message, that's always been about freedom, about belonging, about finding your voice and finding your people. It's a sound that, at its heart, brings us all together. So from that very first distorted guitar riff that shocked the world, all the way to the newest track you just added to your playlist, rock and roll has been the soundtrack for youth culture finding its voice.
And that leaves us with one last big idea to think about. Every single generation gets to create its own sound, its own anthems. So the only real question left is, what will yours be?